Happy Easter, everyone. Today what we're going to be doing is testing the EGR system on my 1979 Pontiac Firebird Formula. This car has a 4.9 liter 301 cubic inch engine with a 4-barrel carburetor. We can see the EGR system and its details on the vehicle emission control information. And we see that the entire system for this car consists of the EGR valve right here, and it simply has a vacuum line that goes into a port on the carburetor, and that's the entire thing. If we take a look at the car itself, we have the carburetor, and we have this line right here, which is the line from the port on the carburetor, comes down, follows around, and right into the EGR valve. The tools I'm going to be using today are this hand pump with a pressure gauge on it, or a vacuum gauge on it, I should say, and this vacuum gauge that is facing the interior of the car right now. We're going to use that. So let's get started. I'm going to put on my gloves. Give me just a second. Now this system is set up so that if I take my hands and reach under the EGR valve, I can feel the diaphragm and I can press up on it, which tells me that the normal position, the engine off position, or even the idle position for this EGR valve, when the diaphragm is down, the EGR valve is closed and there's no exhaust gases getting into the intake manifold. I don't know if you can hear it. I'll push up and down on it a couple times. Maybe you can hear it. Not sure. But again, that just tells me that the closed position for this valve is with the diaphragm down, and that when vacuum is applied from the carburetor through the vacuum line, when it's appropriate, when it's needed, that vacuum should pull that diaphragm into the up or valve open position. So if I connect, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect my hand pump to the EGR valve, and I'm going to try to create a vacuum, and we'll see if the diaphragm moves and if the EGR valve can hold a vacuum. So I disconnect my vacuum line at the carburetor and I plug it into my pump. And now hopefully when I pump on the pump, I will get a vacuum and it will hold. I get nothing. You see that it's not creating a vacuum at all. There's not holding. It's just like it's going right through. That alone should tell me that the EGR valve isn't working, but we're going to take this a little further just to make sure the rest of the system, or some of the other parts of the system, are working the way they're supposed to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the hand pump, and I'm just going to see if the diaphragm is leaking, if the whole valve is bad, or if it's a part of the valve that's not the diaphragm. I want to see if the diaphragm is working the way it's supposed to. You can also check to make sure that the carburetor is creating vacuum out of the port to operate the valve. So actually what we're going to do that first. We're going to disconnect, I'm going to disconnect the vacuum line from the carburetor, and I'm going to plug it into my vacuum gauge that's facing the inside of the car. So let's go around that way. and start the car. All right, hopefully you can see, there's the vacuum gauge I've got mounted. And start the car. And now it's showing little or no vacuum, which is exactly what we expect when the car is idling. EGR isn't necessary when the car is idling. And if I step on the accelerator, you can see it holds a nice healthy vacuum and everything's fine on that end. So we know that the carburetor is creating the vacuum that we want it to create. That part of the system is working appropriately. So what I'm going to do next is I am going to I'm going to push the diaphragm on the EGR valve and see if it affects the idle quality. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the idle, but I'm going to press up on the diaphragm, opening the EGR valve. And yeah, the idle stumbles a little bit of hesitation, rough idle. Now if I let the diaphragm go again, the idle returns to normal. Again, I push up, open the EGR valve, engine stumbles, which is what we expect it to do, no EGR needed during idle. Let go, idle returns to zero. So what that's telling me is that, again, I've got vacuum being created by the carburetor to the EGR valve when it's supposed to, when under light acceleration. That's when we want the exhaust gases to flow. But that the EGR valve is not responding to that vacuum at all. Which means I will be off to the parts store to get myself a new EGR valve. Thank you.